rain came sideways that morning, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives cold and indifferent, as though the city has decided to test something. Daniel Reyes was already soaked through by the time he reached the lobby doors of Meridian Dynamics. He held one of them open for a man he had never seen before. An elderly man, slight, moving carefully under the weight of 2 large cardboard boxes, water darkening the shoulders of a coat that had probably been expensive once. Nobody else in the revolving door queue had slowed down. Nobody else had looked up from their phones. Daniel took both boxes without asking. He carried them to the security desk. He said something quiet to the man about the weather. The man said something back. Then Daniel went upstairs to begin his day. He did not know the name of the man he had helped. He did not know that the man had taken note of his badge. He did not know that 5 days later, the most important thing that would ever happen to him would begin with that exact moment. What he knew was that his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, had asked him that morning whether grilled cheese sandwiches were still his favorite or whether he had changed his mind. He told her he hadn't changed his mind. She had nodded with great satisfaction and made him one with extra cheese and a drawing of a fox on a napkin tucked beside it. Even though they did not own a fox, that sandwich was still in his bag when they called him into the conference room and told him his position had been eliminated. Daniel Reyes had worked at Meridian Dynamics for 11 years. His title was Building Operations Manager, the title that told you what he oversaw: maintenance schedules, vendor contracts, emergency systems, invisible infrastructure that kept a 32-story company running, but said very little about how he did it. He was 41 years old, the kind of man whose face was easy to read because he had stopped practicing the expression that people in professional environments often wear, the one that communicates competence and slight remove simultaneously. Daniel simply looked like himself, direct, unhurried, genuinely interested in whoever was in front of him. His daughter's name was Lily. He was 8 and treated every question like it deserved to be answered carefully, which meant conversations with her sometimes lasted longer than expected and were always worth the time. Her mother, Sarah, had died 19 months earlier. It had been sudden, the kind of illness that gives you weeks instead of years, and Daniel had tried to explain it to Lily honestly because Sarah had always said that children handle the truth better than adults expect them to. He had found in the months since that this was correct. Lily kept a stuffed rabbit named Pepper on her windowsill. Sarah had given it to her the last birthday she was well enough to shop for one herself. Lily handled it gently and did not take it to school, not because anyone told her not to, but because she had arrived at her own decision that some things were for home. She had made this decision the way she made most decisions, quietly and without consulting anyone, and Daniel had learned not to ask her to explain it. Some rules didn't need reasons attached. They only needed to be respected. Their apartment was in the Riverside neighborhood, 15 minutes from downtown by bus. Daniel made Lily's lunch every morning at 6:50. He wrote a small joke on a sticky note and tucked it into the bag, not because she needed the laugh, but because Sarah had done it. Lily had once told him she liked finding it in there. Some mornings the joke was terrible, the kind of pun that made Lily groan theatrically at the bus stop, and Daniel understood that the groaning was its own form of appreciation. He put her on the school bus at 7:25. He watched it pull away every single time, even the mornings he was running late, because there had been a period, right after Sarah died, when watching the bus disappear around the corner had felt like the only proof he had that the day would, in fact, continue. He was at his desk at 8:30, from the top floor executives to the overnight cleaning crew, not as a policy, simply because that was how he had been raised, and because somewhere along the way he had decided it was the only version of himself worth being. He knew the names of people whose names were easy not to know. He knew that the overnight security guard, Walter, had a granddaughter starting community college in the fall, and he asked about her more often than the question strictly required, because Walter's face changed when he answered, and that change seemed worth the 2 minutes it cost. Meridian Dynamics occupied floors 9 through 32 of a glass tower downtown. It had been founded 14 years earlier by 2 people whose names were not equally well known. Elena Cross was the name that appeared in business press profiles, the one described with words like fearless and visionary and uncompromising. She had taken the company from a 30-person startup to a global platform with nearly 9,000 employees. The other name was Thomas Whitfield. His name appeared in the founding documents, in the equity cap table, and essentially nowhere else. He had stepped back from operations in the company's 4th year, retained a controlling share, and been absent from the building for most of a decade. There were senior managers who had never heard of him. New hires filled out onboarding paperwork that mentioned his name once, in a footnote about equity structure, and never thought about it again. The building itself contained no photograph of him, no plaque, nothing that would have told a person walking through the lobby that half of what they were standing inside belonged, on paper, to someone they had never seen. What they did not know was that Thomas Whitfield had never fully left. He circled back every few years, quietly, without announcement, appearing at industry conferences under an assumed affiliation, walking into offices as an ordinary visitor, as he had done 5 days before the morning this story turns on. He arrived in the rain carrying 2 boxes he did not actually need to carry and stood in the revolving door queue with the patience of someone who understood that observation requires the right conditions. He had watched 7 people walk past. He had watched 1 person stop. The badge had read D. Reyes, Operations. Thomas had noted it the way he noted things that mattered, quietly, without making a production of it. The Monday morning restructuring meeting was called with 2 hours' notice. Daniel received the calendar invite while coordinating an HVAC repair on the 20th floor. Conference room 9C had a glass wall that faced the main open-plan floor. Daniel sat in the second chair on the left. Elena Cross sat at the head of the table, her posture communicating that the meeting had a schedule and intended to keep it. 2 HR representatives sat beside a lawyer named Priya, whose expression had been practiced into neutrality. An IT director stared at a spot on the table that did not require staring. Elena opened the meeting the way she opened most things, directly. "We're making structural adjustments as part of the year-end efficiency review," she said. "Several roles are being consolidated or eliminated." We went through the IT restructuring first. The director's function was being absorbed into a regional hub 2 states away. Severance terms, our contacts, a timeline. 9 minutes. The IT director nodded at each point, as though nodding might make the sentences shorter. He asked no questions. He seemed, Daniel thought, like a man who had already rehearsed this moment on the drive-in, on the theory that rehearsal might dull it. Then Elena looked at Daniel. "The building operations role is being eliminated. The function will be outsourced to a facilities management firm starting next month." Daniel sat with this for a moment. He had not been expecting it. In 11 years, he had received nothing but strong performance reviews. 6 months ago, he had renegotiated an HVAC service contract that saved the company $290,000 annually. Without being asked, without a presentation, without asking for recognition, because it was the kind of thing that needed doing. None of that was relevant now. He understood that. "What's the timeline?" he asked. "Your last day is Friday." He nodded once. He did not perform the composure. He simply had it, the way a person has it when they have survived a loss large enough that professional setbacks, however real, have been correctly sorted into a secondary category. He asked 2 practical questions and received 2 practical answers. Then he stood and walked out. Priya caught up with him in the hallway, her folder still under her arm. "For what it's worth," she said, "I argued against the timeline. Not the decision. The timeline." Daniel looked at her and understood that this was, in its way, an honest thing to say, and that it cost her something to say it in a hallway where anyone could overhear. "I appreciate that," he said, and meant it, and kept walking. He went to his office on the 11th floor and packed his desk into a cardboard box. Travel mug. A spare charger. A small frame drawing Lily had made of the 2 of them standing in front of something that was supposed to be their apartment building, but looked more like a birthday cake. A coffee mug with a chip in the handle that he had never gotten around to replacing because Sarah had bought it for him at a farmer's market in their first year together. And some things you kept not out of sentiment exactly, but because replacing them felt like an admission you weren't ready to make. He put the lid on the box. He looked around the office once, the way you look at a room you don't expect to see again, memorizing nothing in particular and everything at once. Then he picked up the box and took the elevator to the lobby. The elevator was empty except for a maintenance technician named Ruiz, who had worked under Daniel for 6 years and clearly hadn't heard yet. "Heading out early?" Ruiz asked, glancing at the box. Daniel considered several answers and chose the true one. "Not exactly by choice," he said. Ruiz's face did something complicated. Daniel, that's not right." "No," Daniel agreed. "It isn't. But it is what it is today." The doors opened before Ruiz could find the next sentence, and Daniel stepped out into the lobby carrying his 11 years in a box that weighed almost nothing. The parking structure at Meridian Dynamics sat across a service alley from the main entrance. Daniel was crossing toward it when he heard the engines, not one car, but several arriving together, at a pace that was neither hurried nor casual. 8 black SUVs turned into the alley in a measured column, each one maintaining the same precise distance from the vehicle ahead. They pulled to a stop in a formation that was clearly deliberate. Daniel stopped walking. The lead SUV's door opened. The man who stepped out was slight, in his late 70s, wearing a coat that had probably been expensive once. He moved with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body required more consultation than it used to, but whose attention remained entirely precise. Daniel recognized him in the same moment the man turned and found him standing there across the alley with a cardboard box in his hands. The elderly man from the rain. Thomas Whitfield crossed the distance at his own pace. He stopped in front of Daniel and looked at the box. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. "Just found out," Daniel said. "First day of the rest of it." "Do you remember me?" "We were carrying boxes," Daniel said. "Last Wednesday in the rain. And you helped me." "You had 2 boxes," Daniel said. "That's one too many for one person in weather like that." Thomas made a small sound that was almost a laugh. "I've been walking into this building for 14 years to observe what ordinary people do when no one appears to be watching. In 14 years, you are the 5th person who has helped me without being asked. What happened to the other 4? 3 still work here, in roles that deserve to be larger. One left 5 years ago to open a shop of his own. They sent me a photo when the doors finally opened." The corner of Thomas's mouth moved. "I keep good notes." "Why boxes?" Daniel asked. "Why not just walk in and ask to see how the place runs? You own half of it." "Because ownership announces itself the moment anyone learns it's in the room," Thomas said. "People rearrange themselves for owners. They straighten their collars. They stop being the person they are on an ordinary Tuesday and start being the person they think an owner wants to see. I've spent 14 years trying to design around that reflex, and the only method that has ever worked is to stop being recognizable. 2 boxes and a bad coat accomplish more than any audit I have ever commissioned." Daniel looked at him for a moment. "That's a strange way to spend a career." "It's the only honest way I've found to spend one," Thomas said. He looked toward the building entrance, where a small cluster of staff had begun gathering by the glass, phones half raised, unsure yet whether this was something worth recording. "I'd like you to come back inside," he said. "I was just let go," Daniel said simply. "I know. I'd like to discuss that." Daniel thought about Lily's sandwich in his bag and the birthday cake building at the top of his box. He picked up the box and walked back in. The lobby of Meridian Dynamics had a particular acoustic quality Daniel knew well from 11 years inside it. Sound traveled at an angle so that conversations near the reception desk were audible near the elevator banks. The kind of thing you learn by being present in a building long enough. Elena Cross arrived from the elevator with Priya from legal and a senior operations director named Marcus. She extended her hand to Thomas with the composure of someone who had been given just enough notice to prepare. "This is unexpected," she said. "We didn't have you on the calendar." "No," Thomas agreed. "You wouldn't." She shook her hand and turned slightly, which brought Daniel into the frame of the conversation without any explicit gesture toward him. Elena's eyes moved to Daniel, then to the cardboard box, then back to Thomas. The sequence was brief but visible. "We were in the middle of a restructuring process," she said. "I know," Thomas said. "I read the documentation last night. Efficiency model. The outsourcing proposal, the cost projections." He paused. "The logic is coherent. That's what makes it insufficient." The lobby had been filling steadily, perhaps 30 people along the outer edges of the space, doing what people do when they want to watch something without appearing to have chosen to watch it. Thomas did not lower his voice. "This company was built on a set of values I wrote on a whiteboard 14 years ago," he said. "Not the ones in the annual report. The actual ones. The ones that said the way you treat the person who repairs your building tells you more about an organization than any metric I have ever seen anyone generate." He looked at Elena. "I came here last week as an ordinary visitor, without announcement, because that is the only way to see what is actually there." He returned to Daniel. "The man you eliminated this morning was the only person in this building who saw someone who needed help and provided it, without calculation, without asking who I was, without deciding whether it served any purpose." He looked at Elena again. "In a company of 9,000 people, that is not a redundancy. That is an increasingly rare resource." Elena stood with her posture unchanged. She did not offer a defensive bridge. She was listening. "I want to be precise about something," Thomas continued, "because I don't want this mistaken for sentiment. I am not here because I feel sorry for one man losing a job. I have watched companies my size lose good people to spreadsheets 100 times, and I have not always intervened, because not every case tells you something true. This one does. This is a company that will, within 5 years, be twice the size it is today, And every year it grows. The distance between the people who make decisions and the people who live with them will grow with it. The only defense against that distance is deciding, on purpose, to keep someone whose entire job is closing it. That is not charity. That is infrastructure, the same as the elevators and the wiring. You simply cannot see it on a balance sheet, which is precisely why balance sheets keep eliminating it. What I'm proposing, Thomas said, is a new role. Director of People and Practice. Building the internal standards and everyday behaviors that determine what this company actually is, not what its slide decks say. Compensation commensurate with senior leadership. Full authority within the function. Daniel set his cardboard box down. You don't know me, he said. You saw me once in a lobby. Saw you in a situation where most people reveal exactly who they are, Thomas said, because they're not performing. They're just moving through their day. Why does that qualify me for an executive role? It doesn't, Thomas said. Your 11-year record does. The service contract you renegotiated without being asked. The fact that you have never once asked a person to do something you wouldn't do yourself. He paused. The lobby was confirmation. It told me the record wasn't a performance. Daniel thought about what Sarah would have said. He knew exactly, because she had said versions of it many times, on ordinary evenings in their kitchen. Take care of it. I have a condition, Daniel said. Thomas waited. The maintenance staff, the cleaning crew, whatever I build starts with them, not the top floor. Thomas held his gaze. That was always going to be the right place to start. I was hoping you'd say it yourself. Elena Cross found Daniel in the hallway outside conference room, 9C at 2:45 that afternoon. She came alone. No Priya, no assistant. Her hands were at her sides. She usually carried something, a tablet, a folder. And the absence of it made her look different than she did in meetings, less managed. I owe you an apology, she said. Daniel waited. He had learned over the years that the correct response to an apology in its opening was silence. People needed the room to finish. I made a decision about your role based on a cost model, she said. But I didn't look at what the cost model couldn't see. She looked at him directly. Watching you walk toward that parking structure with a box of your things. That was the blind spot, made visible. I needed to see it. I'm grateful you didn't let me miss it. It takes something to say that in a lobby in front of 30 people, he said. That was Thomas's doing, she said. Not mine. You didn't leave, he said. That part was yours. She was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something, she said. Why did you agree to any of this? You could have taken the severance and never thought about this building again. Nobody would have blamed you. Daniel considered the question honestly, the way he tried to consider most things. My wife used to say that most people spend their whole careers waiting for permission to do the job the way they already know it should be done. He said, I don't need the title. I need to know I tried to do it the way she would have recognized. Elena didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was quieter than it had been in the meeting. I'm sorry about your wife, she said. I didn't know. Most people don't, Daniel said. It doesn't come up in a cost model. She looked at him with an expression he had seen before on the faces of people in this building when he remembered their names, or noticed something was wrong before they said so. It was the expression of being seen. I'd like to work well with you, she said. I'm not sure how that goes yet, but I'd like to find out. Daniel extended his hand. She shook it. That evening, before any of it had settled into something he fully understood, Daniel picked Lily up from the after-school program at the usual time and said nothing right away about the day. They made dinner together. She was in charge of setting the table, a job she took with the seriousness of someone handling classified material. And it wasn't until she was brushing her teeth that she looked at him in the bathroom mirror and asked, Did something happen at your work today? You have your thinking face on. She had learned from Sarah not to lie to her about the shape of a thing, even when the details could wait. Something did, he said. It's a good thing, I think. But it's a big change, and I'm still getting used to it. Lily considered this with a toothbrush still in her mouth, which made her look, briefly, much younger than 8. She spat, rinsed, and studied him in the mirror a while longer. Good like a surprise, or good like homework you get to skip? Good like a surprise, Daniel said. I'll tell you all of it this weekend, when I understand it better myself. Okay, she said, in the tone she used when she had decided a question could be set down for the night, and picked back up later if it turned out to still be necessary. She hugged him around the middle, quick and businesslike, and went to find Pepper. Daniel sat on the edge of the bathtub for a minute after she'd gone, in the particular quiet of an apartment with one child asleep in it, and let himself feel the day fully, without an audience, for the first time since the conference room that morning. Then he got up, checked the lock on the front door twice out of habit, and went to bed. The first 3 months were not cinematic. Daniel started where he had said he would start. He met with every member of the maintenance and cleaning staff individually, not in conference rooms, but in the break room on the 9th floor, where they kept the good coffee and a table with a wobbly leg that facilities had been asked to fix twice already. He fixed it himself on the second Tuesday, with a wrench from his truck, in the 15 minutes before his 9 o'clock. He listened more than he talked. He asked what worked and what didn't, and what they wished the people above them understood about how the building actually functioned. He wrote everything down in a notebook that lived in his jacket pocket. It was nearly full within 5 weeks. He built a new onboarding program, led not by an executive slide deck, but by the people who actually ran the building. A cleaning crew lead named Dolores walked new hires through their first morning and explained, without performance, why the place ran the way it did, which supply closet had the good mop heads, why the 14th floor bathroom always ran cold first, which elevator bank to avoid at 8:45 if you didn't want to stand in it for 10 minutes. It was not the kind of information anyone had ever thought to put in an orientation binder, and it turned out to be exactly the information that made new hires feel like they belonged somewhere rather than merely reported somewhere. Daniel sat in on the first 3 sessions from the back of the room and said nothing, because it wasn't his story to tell, and Dolores told it better than he could have anyway. He rebuilt the internal recognition system, which had been a quarterly email with 2 names in it, into something with actual teeth. Peer nomination, real dollar value attached. A follow-up conversation 4 months out to check whether the recognition had actually translated into anything. There were setbacks, because there always are. A regional director 2 levels below Elena pushed back hard in a meeting, arguing that the recognition budget would be better spent on client-facing incentives. And for a week it looked like the whole program might be quietly starved of funding before it had a chance to prove anything. Daniel didn't escalate it. He asked the director to spend one morning with him on the loading dock instead, watching how a delivery got from the street to the 30th floor. How many hands touched it along the way? How many of those hands nobody upstairs could name? The director didn't say much afterward, but the budget stayed, and grew slightly, the following quarter. Ruiz, the technician from the elevator, was the first person nominated under the new system for a repair he'd made to a failing server room cooling unit at 2 in the morning without waking anyone to ask permission, because the alternative was risking equipment that mattered to people who would never know his name. Daniel made sure he did know it, in front of people who mattered, at a small gathering in the break room that Elena attended without being asked to. He was not trying to do any of it quickly. He was trying to do it correctly, which required a patience Daniel had been practicing without naming it since the morning 19 months earlier when he had sat in a hospital room, and understood that you cannot rush the things that take the time they take. On a Friday in May, Daniel picked Lily up from school himself. She came through the gate at 3:40 with her backpack worn on her front. She always wore it that way, like a small piece of armor, and found him standing on the sidewalk. She stopped. She studied him with the careful attention she brought to most important things. "You're early," she said. "I am. Is everything okay?" He crouched down to her level, not bending, but actually coming down so he was looking at her height, and not from above it. "Everything is good," he said. She looked at him for another moment. She had inherited Sarah's ability to read him, which meant reassurances only worked when they were true, and she knew the difference. "Okay," she said. She took his hand. They walked toward the bus stop. She told him about a disagreement at recess involving the rules of a game she hadn't explained enough for him to follow. Something about whether bagging someone counted if they were technically still touching the wall, a distinction that seemed to matter enormously to the parties involved. But he listened to all of it with the attention it deserved, asking the occasional clarifying question, because Lily had a way of testing whether you were actually listening or just waiting for your turn to talk, and he had learned that the tests were not always announced as tests. "Whose side were you on?" he asked when she'd finished. "Nobody's," she said with some dignity. "I was the judge. Marcus wanted me to be on his side, but I told him a judge can't have a side or it isn't fair." "That's a good rule," Daniel said. "I know," Lily said. "I made it up." At the corner, she said, "Dolores came to my class." He kept his voice level. What did she talk about? About keeping buildings clean. But not like it was a boring thing, like it mattered. She looked up at him. She said someone at her job taught her to talk about it that way. That someone told her the work she did held everything up. Daniel looked at the street ahead of them. "She's right," he said. "It does." Lily adjusted her backpack. "Dad," she said, "was your job hard?" He thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket, nearly full. He thought about the wobbly table leg and the wrench from his truck. He thought about Thomas Whitfield crossing a rainy alley, and 8 black SUVs, and a cardboard box set down on a lobby floor. He thought about Sarah, who had always said that the work worth doing was rarely the work that announced itself as important. Some days, he said, the days that aren't hard are the days I've done my job right. Lily nodded, the nod that meant she was filing it away. Pepper's ear came a little loose, she said. I wanted to tell you. We'll fix it before dinner, he said. She was satisfied. He took his hand again. The city ran its Friday afternoon around them, the ordinary noise of a place that does not pause for the small, significant moments happening inside it. They passed the corner store where Sarah used to buy the good bread on Saturdays, and Lily slowed slightly, the way she always did at that particular storefront, though she never said why and Daniel never asked. Some silences were their own kind of conversation. After a while, he asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. She thought about it. I want to fix things, she said. But not broken things. More like things that don't work right yet. Like people? He asked. She shook her head. People aren't broken. They just need someone to pay attention to them, right? Your mom used to say something like that, he said. Lily looked straight ahead, quiet in the way she was quiet when something needed to settle first. I know, she said. She told me. They turned the corner onto their block. May light turned ordinary brick into something worth stopping to look at, if you were the kind of person who looked. Daniel was the kind of person who looked. An elderly man carrying 2 boxes in the rain. A cleaning crew lead who knew why her work mattered. An 8-year-old girl who understood that people were not broken. A technician who fixed a cooling unit at 2 in the morning because the alternative was unacceptable to him, whether or not anyone ever found out. The things that held everything up were almost never the things that announced themselves. He had known that before the alley, before the lobby, before Thomas Whitfield, and the 8 black SUVs. He had known it the way a person knows something they were taught early enough that they cannot remember being taught it. The way you know the sound of your own front door, or the weight of a hand you've held 10,000 times. It wasn't a lesson Thomas had given him. It was a lesson Thomas had recognized, already finished, already sitting quietly inside a man carrying 2 boxes he didn't need to carry. Sarah had known it too, long before any of this, in the ordinary unrecorded evenings of their kitchen, in the way she talked about her patients, in the note she used to leave folded into a lunch bag on a Tuesday for no occasion at all. Lily was learning it now, in her own words, at her own pace, the way she learned everything, carefully and completely, and without needing anyone to tell her twice. But he was glad that someone had been watching. And he was glad that when the watching was done, they had found him exactly as he always was.